I'm Phil Koopman. I'm a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. I've been working on self-driving car safety for more than 25 years, getting close to 30 at this point. And more recently, I've written a couple books on the topic about L145, which is a system-level safety standard for autonomous cars and trucks, and also How Safe is Safe Enough, which gets into people say they want it to be as safe as a human driver, but they have no idea how hard that is usually. So what I'm going to do in my small amount of time here is I'm going to go kind of fast, and I'll give you a pointer at the end for the longer, more fulsome versions of all these. But I'm going to talk about 6 challenges in autonomous vehicle assessment, because fully autonomous cars are out on the roads and trucks are out on the roads, sometimes with human supervision, sometimes not. And we've learned an awful lot about what people thought and what went right and what went wrong and the surprises. So I want to go over the dimensions to what safety means. And I think part of what we have, one of the earlier questions was, are the AI people really talking to the safety people? And I've been in the workshops where that tries to happen. And one of the biggest gulfs is people say the word safe and they mean completely different things and don't even realize it. So I want to take this talk through the lens of there's different ways to look at what safe even means. And if you don't know what safe means, if you can't agree on safe means, then I have no idea how you're going to get AI safety that means anything at all. So this is a first step. And I'll just talk about these 6 topics. I won't spend the time now to list them. First, brute force road testing. Initially, people said, and then the safety folks knew this wasn't going to work, but the people building technology said, well, we're just going to drive around, and if we drive along long enough without a crash, we'll know it's perfect. And the numbers just don't work. You have ballpark 100 million miles per fatality in the US. It goes up, it goes down. That's a long-term average. We know human drivers can do about that. If you want to get 95% confidence, you're testing 3 times longer with no mishaps, but you probably will have one. By the time you're done, it's probably 1 billion miles of testing to get statistical significance under very favorable statistical assumptions, which are probably not true. But what does that mean? That's like 50 round trips on every road in the world with fewer than 10 fatalities. Okay, where are we now? Well, we're at 7 to 10 million miles, 100x more miles to go. You have companies claiming we're already saving lives, and they're a factor of 100 out from knowing if they're actually safer than human drivers or not. They saved maybe 1/10 of a life or something like that. And if you have heavy tail events, there's a long talk I can do about this, but I'll give you the very short version. That optimistic math assumes independent arrivals with a light tail, meaning that the rare events are actually kind of rare. There's a lot of reason to believe that there's a very large number of rare events, and the area under the curve out at the very rare events is very substantial. And this is why you're seeing companies perhaps taking 10 years and still running into stuff they never saw before. So it's very challenging. The takeaway is whether you believe it's heavy tail or not, brute force testing is never going to prove you're safe because it's just going to take too long. Now, aircraft, you don't fly around till the wings fall off and then decide whether it's okay to put passengers on or not. You do something smarter than this, and we're going to have to do something smarter than this for self-driving cars. So raw brute force accumulation of miles is not going to work for assessment. That may seem obvious after I do the slide, but believe me, it has to be said. Now, what is the industry doing instead? Well, what they're doing, and I'm going to call it assessment, but it's more of a PR attempt, is they're saying humans are terrible drivers. They drink and drive. They're distracted. They're drive drowsy. And because robots don't do those, of course, they'll be safer. The takeaway from this overhyped ad is, well, those 43,000 Americans would not be dead if all the robots were driving because robots don't make stupid human mistakes. Well, human drivers are actually pretty impressive. 1 fatality per 100 million miles is actually a pretty favorable rate. The number of fatalities is simply because of the huge number of miles. But the other thing that we found out when these went on the road is, in fact, we're told in this ad, well, robots don't make stupid mistakes. This is clearly the takeaway. Well, it turns out robots do make stupid mistakes. Here's a robotaxi that rear-ended a city bus because it had not been trained properly on articulated buses with a joint in the middle. And the bottom line is it had a software defect that caused it to ignore the back half of the bus and decide it's far enough behind the front end of the bus. It ran into the back half even though there was no extenuating circumstance. Turns out self-driving cars, robotaxis, have software defects. And software defects lead to crashes. So they may not drive drunk. They don't have human errors because there's no person driving, but they have robot errors. Here's another one that's more recent. Another robotaxi crashes into a telephone pole. The company is being very quiet. They're really not talking about this at all. But I can assure you if they're an extenuating circumstance, we would have heard from them about it now. There also have been more severe crashes. There was an injury crash with a collision with a fire truck because the robotaxi failed to yield to the fire truck on a cross street. And there was a highly publicized pedestrian dragging mishap. The victim there did survive, but with very severe injuries. So we're seeing that saying, well, these things are robots, so you don't have to worry about safety because they won't make stupid mistakes. So don't even bother, it's just let's go on the road. That is not a good assessment strategy either. And from a public messaging point of view, in a regulation point of view, we also saw these companies say, just let us do our thing because we're busy saving lives here. It's so obviously safer. Don't regulate us. You're getting in the way. You're killing people by slowing us down. And the data isn't there to support this, part one, but part two, it turns out to be a PR disaster for the industry. So I would caution other industries from saying we're doing this to save lives, because it takes hundreds of millions of miles to prove you're saving lives, and it only takes a few million miles to get bad pictures in the press that tell you maybe it's not as safe as we thought. So basically that messaging strategy is all downside and no upside. You should have a smarter messaging strategy than that. And there are such, that's a different discussion. So continuing on, what's a core problem? The heavy tail is a core problem, but another core problem for assessment is that in automotive, you have the traditional safety engineering V model. This is used in a lot of industries. And what you do is you trace requirements to implementation, and the testing validates the engineering process. Now, a really key thing here that is not necessarily obvious from the way a lot of engineering is taught is that testing does not prove you're safe. The testing can't prove you're safe. I already gave you the numbers. Testing won't prove you're safe. It takes too much testing. So what's this test doing? The testing has to trace back to the left side of the V to mean anything. And what the testing is doing is, and I'm intentionally using some Bayesian statistics terminology here, the left side of the V sets up a prior expectation that you're safe because you followed your procedures and safety standards and best practices. And the testing is not there to prove you're safe. The testing is there to provide evidence supporting your Bayesian prior assumption that you're safe is justified by a much smaller amount of data. So the testing isn't there to test safety. The testing isn't there to find bugs. Well, it's there to find bugs, but the bugs aren't fix the bug and you're fine. The bug is, wow, every bug means my engineering process failed, so I've lost confidence in the integrity of my engineering. And that mindset is really subtle, but it's super important because machine learning breaks it. With machine learning, there's this magic black box process that goes from something pretty high level, you train on a bunch of data, you get an implementation out, and it's no longer possible to say, all right, here's the requirement, here's a detailed requirement, here's the line of code, here's the unit test. You lose that traceability. So even though you'd say, well, I know my car's supposed to do something, why would you believe it does what you think and doesn't do what you don't think it should do? Because you don't have this traceability. That leads you into brute force testing. And sure, you can use simulation, but how do you know the simulation has all the rare events that were happening at every 50 million miles if you only have 10 million miles of testing? So this is a very thorny problem. There are ways around it, but this is why the current safety critical approaches break on a technical basis, is because you lose the traceability from the left to the right-hand side of the V. Now, there are a bunch of standards. One of the things you can do to set a prior expectation of safety is to be following your industry safety standards. Now, it may be surprising, perhaps even shocking to people in other industries, but unlike aviation, unlike rail, unlike all these other industries I've had safety experience with, I've read so many different safety standards, automotive is not required to follow their own safety standards. And some of the robotaxi companies have gone on record saying the standards don't work for them because they're not a good fit. Now, that's been tempered slightly, but their going in expectation is, no, we don't need safety standards. We got this, trust us because we're smart. And that's having problems out on the road. So there are vehicle safety standards, FMVSS, and there's NCAP. So this applies to all cars. This is, and I know I'm simplifying, but do your headlights work? Do your brakes work? This is normal car functions. You have to have a cybersecurity standard. That standard's out. There's functional safety, and I'm not even going to try and say the numbers speaking this quickly, but the numbers are all out there. Functional safety is if there's a fault inside the unit, does the system fail safe, to very simplify it. There's things about dynamic driving function, which is, hey, you know, radars aren't perfect, lidars aren't perfect, and maybe we're going to see something we didn't expect. How do you plan to do with that? And there's system-level safety standards. ANSI UL 4600 is out. ISO TS 5083 will be out soon. And those are talking about things beyond just driving, and I have a slide coming up on that, so I'll go over it more there. One of the concepts being used is instead of saying there's a rule book like a building code, use wood this thick to give the right amount of structure. You know, don't tell us how to build it. Tell us how to build a safety case that argues we got it right. And ANSI UL 4600 is designed around that, and that's currently a trend that the self-driving car companies the autonomy companies are looking at how to have a way to assess the safety case. So one of the right takeaways I'd recommend is look at assessing the safety case rather than assessing the product based on particular rules, and that's what 4600 does. Right now, these are the only safety standards required. The rest are completely optional, and I don't know of any company who says publicly they will follow them all. Some of them do some of it, but this is not a standards conformance industry right now. There is US DOT put out an advance notice of proposed rulemaking in December 2020 saying, what say we make the industry follow all these? And that's been gathering dust. So US DOT ought to really consider pushing that forward. Now, there's more to safety than just driving. Cute kid, is this car safe to move? No, the kid's not strapped in, right? Okay, well, there's this thought that, well, if I can get my robotaxi, if I have a computer driver and the computer driver can drive down the street and not hit things and follow all the road rules and get out of the way of fire trucks and do all these things, I'm good to go for a robotaxi. And that's simply not true because drivers do more than drive. Who's making sure the kid's buckled in? Who's making sure that, and if it's not a kid, let's say it's an adult who's drunk and the drunk's passed out in the backseat of the robotaxi, who's dealing with that? You know, probably not a computer driver that just knows how to move around. Who's detecting and managing equipment faults? What happens if the system gets thrown out of its operational design domain? You're in Vegas and it starts snowing while you're moving. Does the car know how to deal with that? What if there's a crash? One of the pedestrian dragging mishap, a lot of that had to do with bad post-crash response. The computer driver was programmed to do something that was inappropriate for the circumstance. So it's a lot more than driving. What about lifecycle management? Sure, you have security, but somebody has to make sure the sensors are calibrated and maintained. And how safety critical are the cloud support services? There's a lot more to this than just, can I get a driver that drives down the road? And the system safety standards address this. But just realize, just because you have something that knows how to drive doesn't mean you have something that's going to be safe for all the things that really need to happen to take the human driver out of the vehicle. Right now, the companies have large remote support staffs, and that's not going to scale up. So they're still working on that. The last substantive slide, let me talk about what safe means. What you'll hear people say, well, as long as we're safer than a human driver, then it's fine. And that book I showed you, the Safe Enough book, started with, well, what do you mean by safer than human? And it depends on what zip code they're in, what age they're in, what kind of car they're driving, what kind of weather. It gets really complicated in a hurry. And then if you start asking the next set of questions, you ask, well, okay, now this is a completely hypothetical thought experiment. I'm not saying any robotaxi company would do this. But what if the number of fatalities cuts in half? Okay, so you're safer than a human driver. But the number of pedestrian fatalities doubles. That's going to be a problem for pedestrians, isn't it? So it turns out statistical gains on safety are not enough. You need a much more robust definition of what safety means to keep stakeholders happy. That's going to blow back on you if you end up with that kind of outcome. Now, would that happen? I mean, who knows? But it needs to be a design constraint that's taken into account and not have an unhappy surprise later when you find out you have this risk transfer on the vulnerable populations. You also have to avoid negligent computer driving. You should probably be holding computers to a human driver duty of care. So for example, if you find out that running through stop signs at 5 miles an hour you think is safer because you have less rear end crashes, you're breaking the law. And if you were to injure a pedestrian that you don't happen to see because your sensing's not perfect, you're basically, that could be negligent homicide or whatever the equivalent is in the state. And is that okay for a computer driver to take a chance on? And by the way, who goes to jail if it's a computer? That kind of stuff you can't ignore anymore. You used to be able to ignore legal constraints in safety for the most part because you could just heap that on the human driver and say it's not a technical problem. Guess what? There's no human driver. It becomes a technical problem. I would say you probably need to conform to industry safety standards because that's the only way you're really going to get a robust idea that you were safe before you start doing deployment. And by the way, once you take the human driver out of the vehicle or break the concept that there's a remote human with a steering wheel, which isn't going to work anyway, but once there's not a human driver who's in real time there every second ready to take over in a fraction of a second, that's a deployment. That's not testing, that's a deployment. And the companies say, oh, we're testing without a driver. What they mean is we have an immature product that we're not sure is safe, but we're going to put it out on the road anyway and see what happens. And the folks who are in the cities where that's happening are not too happy about that situation. So ask what it means to deploy. And I would say if the human operator is not instantly responsible for safety, that's a deployment, and you should be very careful whether you allow that to happen. There are a bunch of other ethical and equity considerations, things like the locality should have the ability to have some sort of control over this instead of it being imposed on them. And there has to be an accountability to the companies for harm. There's been a lot of state legislation which the net outcome is to make it really hard to go after the companies if they cause harm, and that's a problem. So when you say, oh, it's safe, if you haven't answered all these questions, you haven't really defined what safe means. There's a lot to it. It's more than just net statistical outcome. Okay, wrapping up, because I'm at my time. I've given you 6 different ways that you have to think about for assessment. If you want to assess safety, you have to define what safe means, and you probably have to consider all these things. And some of them are pretty substantive. Some of them are unsolved problems. If you want more YouTube video than you can possibly stand, go to that link, and most of these things have a whole keynote talk behind them, and have fun watching, but I'll stop here, and if I have time for questions, fine, and if we have to move on, that's fine too. Thank you.